There are some of you that have been probably waiting for this video a little bit, at least since last weekend's NFL draft was finished, and you're wanting me to sit there and just go into hysterics and rant and rave about the shitty draft of the Chicago Bears. Well, you will get that in this video, and I'll make sure to try and leave some time to talk about the other three teams in the division. Let's take a look at how the teams in the NFC North did in the 2013 NFL Draft. And we'll get the dumb shits out of the way immediately. Let's talk about the Bears. I've been a Bears fan for over 25 years, and the one thing I can say unequivocally is that the more the faces change, the more the bullshit with this organization pretty much stays the same. That brings me to the 2013 NFL Draft for the Chicago Bears. To me, them taking Kyle Long in the first round is very reminiscent of taking Shea McClellan in round 1 last year. Kyle Long was not the best player available on the board in anybody else's mind other than the Chicago Bears. He was not the best available player on his side of the ball. So last year, Shea McClellan is a defensive player. This year, Kyle Long is an offensive player. And just like last year, where I felt players like Chandler Jones and maybe even Whitney Mercilus were better players at Shea McClellan's position, I look at Kyle Long, and if you're bringing him in to be a starting guard, I thought Larry Warford from Kentucky graded out as a better prospect as a left guard, in my opinion, than Kyle Long. So the Bears failed, no matter what the measurement is with their first-round pick. But when it comes to the draft, it's not just about round 1. Round 1 is incredibly important because that's the round that you're supposed to find your impact players, your stars, your franchise pieces. But you can find them in other rounds too, make no mistake about it. So we get to round 2. And the Bears do basically the same shit again. They don't take the best player available on anybody's board except their own. They don't take the best available player even on the defensive side of the ball. They don't even take the best available player at his own position. They decided to take Jon Bostic from Florida, who could end up being a solid starting linebacker in the NFL. But again, I emphasize, he wasn't even the best available player at his position. That was Arthur Brown from Kansas State. What defies logic to me is that for a team who for many years now, the offense has been the anchor that has weighed this organization down and been the thing that has kept the Bears from being a real legit contending team with a very good defense, has been the offense. So why for the 4th time in 5th years will this dumb dick organization spend 2 of their first 3 picks on the defensive side of the football? It makes absolutely no sense to me. They don't have a 3rd round pick, mind you, because they traded that away as part of the Brandon Marshall deal. So in the 4th round, they take Khaseem, the linebacker from Rutgers. So you spend 2 of your first 3 picks on linebackers. I'm not going to sit there and say that those weren't team needs, but why take a linebacker in round 4 when you already took one in round 2? And what really defies logic to me is this. Is that you got rid of Lovie Smith. You got rid of that defensive mindset, supposedly. You brought in an offensive-minded head coach, so you would think logic would indicate that you would make sure you devoted the majority of your first draft to helping that new offensive coach out by, giving them as much offensive help as you possibly can. But out of the 6 picks in this draft, only 3 of them were offensive. There was a 1st-round offensive lineman, a 5th-round offensive lineman, and a 7th-round wide receiver. That's not getting the job done. If you think that's good, you are wrong. Now, it kind of strikes me as funny and ironic a little bit when I talk about the more the faces change, the more the bullshit stays the same. This draft to me in some ways is very reminiscent of a draft you would see under Mark Hatley or under Jerry Angelo, where the first pick or the first 2 picks were very questionable, but the rest of the picks in the draft could potentially be contributors. They were very good values. They got some steals there. A couple of these guys could potentially start down the road. That's kind of what I see in this Bears draft. Khaseem Greene is a very limited player, and what I mean is he's a weak side linebacker, in my opinion, in a 4-3 scheme. In particular, maybe a cover 2. Well, he could sit behind Lance Briggs for a year or 2, and he might end up being Lance Briggs' replacement at that position. Really good value in round number 4. Cornelius Washington is very reminiscent to me of the Bears taking Mark Anderson in 2006 in the 5th round out of Alabama, a situational pass rusher that could potentially, as a late-round pick, contribute as a rookie. And that's what I see out of Cornelius Washington out of Georgia. brings some versatility. He brings you another pass rusher. Very good value in round number 6. Marquess Wilson, their 7th round pick, the wide receiver from Washington State. He probably would have been a 2nd, maybe 3rd, or even 4th round pick if he hadn't walked out and quit on his team at Washington State. But I can't blame him. I wouldn't want to play for that douchebag of a coach either. But he's a guy that's very talented. He's got, prototypical NFL receiver size in terms of being able to play on the outside. He's not a slot wide receiver, I don't think. But he's a guy 6'4", 190 pounds. For a 7th round pick, that's pretty damn good value. So when you look at the Bears, this is Phil Emery's 2nd draft. And to me, his draft last year was very reminiscent of Mark Hatley's draft in '98 and Angelo's draft in 2002, their first drafts as general manager. Hatley swung and missed big time on the 1st round pick. Don't get me started. Curtis fucking Enos. Do I need to say more? And Jerry Angelo in 2002 missed on his 1st round pick, Mark Colombo, and missed on other players such as Terrence Metcalf and Roosevelt Williams, But in year 2 with those guys as general manager, they did a much better job in the draft. It ended up working out well. The '99 draft, several pieces from that draft ended up being the building blocks for the 2001 Bears team that went 13-3. The 2003 draft, you got several building blocks such as Lance Briggs and Peanut Tillman, and even other role players like Ian Scott and Todd Johnson, Justin Gage, Bobby Wade. They were key contributors to the Bears in that 2005-2006 run. So there is hope here. There is hope for this 2nd draft of Phil Emery's. And I look, and there are potentially some guys. Bostic's probably going to be a starter. Kyle Long's probably going to be a starter, at least initially. Khaseem Greene could be a future starter. Washington could be a nice contributor as a specialist pass rusher. Marquess Wilson could end up being a contributor. This could end up going down as a solid draft. Except, it's also reminiscent to me of those '99 and 2003 drafts, and that the Bears horribly swung and missed with their first 2 picks. In '99, they took Cade McNown in round 1 and Russell Davis in round 2. That didn't work out so well, did it? In 2003, they had 2 first-round picks after trading with the Jets in that draft, so they decided to take Michael Haynes and Rex Grossman. Misses again. So it was all about the mid and late round picks that helped save those drafts that ended up being key contributors. And I think that's what you're going to see here. I don't think Kyle Long's going to be a total flop, but he's always going to be somebody that I look back on and say, my God, they could have had Eifert, they could have had Hopkins, they could have had Patterson, they could have had Justin Hunter, they could have had Geno fucking Smith. They could have had several offensive players, and they chose this guy instead. I'm going to look at round 2. I'm going to say, well, if they were going to address linebacker, which was a team need, they didn't take Arthur Brown. They're going to regret that. Or they could have sat there and taken a better offensive player in round 1 and taken their guard like Larry Warford in round 2. Round 4 with Khaseem Greene, a nice value pick. But I'm going to look at it and say, you got teams like the Niners are getting both Quentin Patton and Marcus Lattimore in round number 4. Chances are one or both of those players is going to be a better NFL player than Khaseem Greene. It's just you find this throughout the whole course of the draft. A 5th round pick on an offensive tackle from Louisiana Tech, really? Take somebody like Ryan Swope from Texas A&M. My God. So no, this was not a very good draft for the Bears at all. Some of the value there on day 3 was pretty good, but it's the organizational philosophy. It's what it represents. It's obvious to me that Phil Emery doesn't understand how to properly evaluate talent. He doesn't understand how to properly play the draft game. He doesn't know how to properly understand how to build around your quarterback, how to build around your new head coach and his offensive philosophy. So what grade did I give the Bears? I can't give them an F, even though I gave their 1st round pick a grade of an L and a 2nd round pick a grade of a J. The values on day 3 were solid with 3 of their 4 picks. So I give them a D+, but to me, a 2nd straight failure overall for Phil Emery as a general manager of the Chicago Bears. Unlike my Chicago Bears, who failed to impress me, the Detroit Lions, I felt, did a pretty solid job of attempting to address some of their biggest needs in this 2013 NFL Draft. They got Ziggy Ansah with the 5th overall pick. The bottom line is they pretty much had nothing at defensive end. And when you look at Ansah's upside and his potential, yeah, he's 24 years old, but this is a guy who's still relatively new to football, has only played 3 or 4 years, and he's a guy with tremendous upside. You're thinking along the lines maybe of Jason Pierre-Paul. So to get a talent like that with that type of upside at your biggest position of need, arguably, at defensive end with the 5th overall pick, I felt was a very good job by general manager Martin Mayhew. And in general, the Lions needed help on the defensive side of the football. They really, really did. And you have a defensive-minded head coach who's on the hot seat. You need to do as much as you can to help out that head coach. See that, Chicago Bears? This is what good general managers do. Now, with their second-round pick, I wonder if they made the right selection with Darius Slay. I like Slay as a talent. I think he's somebody that could potentially start for them as a rookie at corner. But I wonder ultimately if they're going to regret passing on somebody like, let's say, a Monte Teo. I'm just throwing that out there. You know, getting Warford in the third round I thought was a huge steal. He's somebody that's going to come in and be a day one starter on the interior of that offensive line, provide a real road grading presence, both as a run blocker and as a pass protector. I like some of the other picks, like taking Devin Taylor from South Carolina, a very athletically gifted defensive end who could come in and be a role player in his first year, maybe two, could potentially start. Other guys like Theo Riddick I thought were pretty good values. Michael Williams was a pretty good value, getting him in the 7th round, a run blocking tight end. I thought this was a solid draft for the Detroit Lions. It's not one that makes them a Super Bowl contender, but they did address some of their biggest needs, and they didn't really reach for any of the first 4 players in particular that they took. So I gave them a nice grade of, let's say, a B-. When I look at the Green Bay Packers for the past 3 seasons, they've been the class to me of the NFC North, and I don't think they did anything in this draft to necessarily hurt that standing. Now, I will say I'm not the hugest fan of them taking Detone Jones with the 26th overall pick. I look at him like I did with Nick Perry last year, a guy who was really good value at where he was drafted, but I kind of question whether or not he was the best fit for the type of scheme that the Packers run. I do have some concerns about Jones being able to play defensive end in the 3-4. I viewed him more as a 4-3 power end than a 3-4 defensive end. You could prove me wrong, but I do have questions about him, similar to like I did Nick Perry, a player I liked, but I didn't necessarily like the scheme fit. I wasn't sure he was athletic or explosive or quick enough to play outside linebacker in the 3-4. Only time will tell. Now, the Packers just gave a shit ton of money to Clay Matthews, obviously, but they also gave a shit ton of money to Aaron Rodgers, wisely. He's the man. He's their franchise quarterback. So you need to help him out as much as possible. So I do wonder if they should have maybe taken Hopkins or Cordero Patterson or Justin Hunter with that first-round pick. But they made sure they devoted the next several picks in their draft to the offensive side of the football. To be able to get a guy like Eddie Lacy at the end of round 2, be able to trade down and still get your running back, your day one starter potentially, that's huge. And then to be able to double up in round 4 and get somebody like Jonathan Franklin to fall into your lap. You've doubled up at, to me, what was your biggest position of need, which was running back. Great job by Green Bay. I have to give them credit. I really like the pick of Charles Johnson from Grand Valley State in the 7th round. There are other players like Bakhtari. I like that selection. Micah Hyde from Iowa I think is going to be a good role player for them potentially. I thought this was another good, solid outing for Ted Thompson. Not the best outing he's had, but he didn't do a lot to necessarily hurt his team. I think the big winners in the NFC North, and perhaps the biggest winners in the entire NFL in this 2013 NFL Draft, were the Minnesota Vikings. To be able to get Sharif Floyd at number 23, to be able to get Xavier Rhodes at 25, 2 day one starters for their defense at big positions of need. Floyd gives them a pass rushing presence on the interior of that line, somebody to go on the other side of Kevin Williams, could potentially take over at some point in time with Kevin Williams and be the heart and soul of that defense. To be able to get that big physical man cover corner in Rhodes at 25. And then because of their success in last year's draft, the ability to get talent and quality talent and depth and really hit it out of the park in last year's draft, they bought themselves the luxury to be more aggressive this time around. They said, hey, we've got an offensive playmaker we've got our eyes on. We need to help out Christian Ponder, too. It's not just about the defense. To trade up, to get a guy who I argue is a top 10 talent in this draft, and Cordero Patterson at pick 29, I think was huge. That was a big win for the Minnesota Vikings. It really was. To get 3 first-round talents where you did and get 3 guys that I thought were all top 20 talents at picks 23, 25, and 29, a great success. But then to get a guy like Gerald Hodges in the 4th round as an outside linebacker, somebody that could potentially be a day one starter as well. I really love this Minnesota Vikings draft. They got aggressive when they needed to be. They played the board and got good value when it was called for. To me, I give the Vikings an A. This is a draft here, when partnered up with last year's draft, make the Minnesota Vikings a real contender in 2014, assuming that Christian Ponder develops and takes that next step in his career progression. Otherwise, all of this will be for naught. But to be able to get that type of talent on the defensive side that will contribute from day one and long term, and be able to get another playmaker on offense, at Cordero Patterson, that does it, a good job of replacing the void that was left by the trade with Percy Harvin. I give the Vikings an A for this draft. And to me, they are now clearly the second best team in the NFC North.